They're terrorizing Americans.
It's not terrorizing to get an offer.
You want the tiny violin out for the people being offered 8 months of paid vacation.
You may not care about
Tell that to
CIA
Americans who can't afford groceries. 8 months of paid vacation.
So up next, we're going to watch a clip from my CNN panel where a woke journalist crashed out over the idea that federal employees are being offered the voluntary chance to resign and get 8 months paid time off. He called this the Trump administration terrorizing federal employees. Yes, seriously, take a listen.
And this is the kind of crude and ignorant and sort of cruel policy that we see across the federal government. I have friends in every department who don't know if they can pay their mortgages, don't know if their kids are going to be able to stay in school because they might have to move. And these are people who often are, in almost all cases, are patriotic Americans who signed up to serve their country.
But none of that's
betraying
going
them,
to
and we're
happen.
betraying the people.
None of that's going to happen because of the CIA buyout. They get offered 8 months if they want it. About 1% of federal employees have taken the other buyouts.
You think we don't need the CIA?
But that's not what anyone said. A buyout is an option that they can take if they want, and not 8 months paid leave.
They're terrorizing Americans.
It's not terrorizing to get an offer.
You want the tiny violin out for the people being offered 8 months of paid vacation.
You may not care about
Tell that to
CIA
Americans who can't afford groceries. 8 months of paid vacation.
What does that have nothing to do with it.
For me,
because these people buy groceries too, because they are Americans who buy groceries.
And they're very well
losing
paid.
their job.
And they work for taxpayers.
So this guy, Josh Rogan, he's a journalist with the Washington Post. I'm sure he's a perfectly nice guy, but I have to say, I found his takes here hysterical and ridiculous. And that's why I tried to push back on them. It is not cruel to offer people the opportunity to resign if they want to and get 8 months paid severance where they get paid and don't have to work. First off, layoffs happen all the time in regular America. People who work in corporate America that's a fact of life. And many of them aren't lucky enough to get 8 months of severance. And by the way, guys, federal government employees actually make more than their private sector equivalents when you count their very extensive benefits. I just found this hysterical and absurd to suggest that you are terrorizing people by offering them the opportunity to resign and get paid leave. Like, that's not what that word means, and you sound hysterical. We'll get into this more later in the show, but it does seem that some of these folks have not learned the lesson and continue to be hyperbolic and alarmist about any and all things related to Donald Trump. And then I got so annoyed when he said, "You think we don't need the CIA?" Brother, that is not what anybody said. We're talking about downsizing the CIA by at least 1% and at most 10 to 15%. That is not the same thing as saying we're going to get rid of all our intelligence agencies. We're going to defund all of law enforcement. Like, you're just obviously not engaging in good faith if that's what you heard from what we are saying. But to be clear, I do have sympathy for federal employees or anybody who gets laid off, but there is no divine right to be employed at taxpayers' expense. And offering people the chance to voluntarily resign is not a hate crime. That's really all I said. That's really all I argued, but that seemed to upset a lot of people online. I got one comment that said, "Watched you on Abby tonight. As a federal employee, your disrespect and degrading comments were offensive. We are people too, with families and careers. We work hard. We don't deserve all the insults and negativity." That comment actually made me sad because I really don't think I insulted anyone, and that was not my intent. I simply pushed back on hysteria and advocated that, yes, we need to downsize our federal government because it is massively bloated and we are spending ourselves into a financial hole. But frankly, there's a lot of entitlement in these spaces where a lot of people think they are entitled to these vast salaries and benefits at taxpayer expense and are absurdly acting like even talking about 1 to 10% cuts is outrageous. It's not. And no amount of shrieking or hysteria will change that fact. Now we'll get into another clip where, honestly, I felt kind of gaslit by some of the Democrats on the panel. Take a listen.
How does defunding the CIA actually make us stronger?
Good question.
My question is, like, if you're going to go out and defund law enforcement, and you gave us hell, Democrats, with that awful talking point that they ran around the country with 4 years ago, but if you're going to defund law enforcement, right, How does this actually make us stronger around the world?
This doesn't reduce the CIA's budget. They're
We're not
offering
talking
people
about
to
that.
take out.
We're not talking about
and
that.
I think they can afford a 1% shave of the headcount at the CIA.
we're not
It's a
talking
massive
talking
bloated
about
agency.
Just so people understand what you're talking about, 1% is what we are being told at the moment has been the take-up rate. For
How
this.
many CIA...
It's not to say that is what they want. They have said, Doge and those folks, they said they want it to be 10 to 15% of the workforce.
And we could absolutely do that.
So the question is, if you just go ahead and say 10 to 15% of the workforce at the FBI, at the CIA, go away, and you don't have a plan to, let's say you want to replace them with different kinds of people, but you don't have a plan to do that, how does that make us safer?
A, I don't think they want to replace them. I think they want to reduce the size of the government.
So how does that make us safer?
B, well, I mean, I don't know that it makes us unsafe to have a slightly smaller government. B, on this buyouts across the board, I think
I want to be clear, we're talking here about the CIA and the FBI. I'm not talking about the government.
they are in the government. But
in broad terms, I'm talking about specific agencies that are tasked with national security
and
law enforcement responsibilities.
I think in those agencies and in every agency, for any Republican president, it is a fair assessment that most of the federal bureaucracy, a good chunk of it, is openly hostile to your worldview and your agenda. That's number one.
That is true.
That is absolutely true.
It's ridiculous.
Of course, let me finish.
But finish your
point. And so you could walk in and say, everybody who doesn't support me leave, or you could walk in and say, I'm going to give you the option. If you don't feel like you can support my agenda, here's a pretty generous way out for the moment because you don't have to work here.
Well, that got a little bit chaotic. I just want to say it is an objective fact, whether Washington Post journalists like it or not, that the federal workforce, the people that work for the federal government, mostly in Washington, D.C., are overwhelmingly left-leaning. They're overwhelmingly Democratic. I mean, this is to some extent reflected by just the political demographics and voting trends of DC itself and its outer areas, but you can also look at, for example, donations from federal employees and who they go to. According to governmentexecutive.com, federal employees donated $4.2 million in the presidential race, and it mostly went to Kamala Harris. All in, 84% of the money they donated went to Harris versus just about 16% going to Trump. So it's just a fact, right, that they lean left. And this guy was gaslighting us and trying to argue that that's not the case. And to the other point that was raised, it just seems absurd to me to suggest that these massive agencies can't get a slight haircut in their personnel without it making us unsafe. And I also think the burden is on them to prove that there's no way to cut 5% of your staff without putting America in danger. You actually have to prove that. We don't have to prove the negative of how this doesn't make us unsafe. You actually have to prove when you're taking taxpayer money and spending it on these massive bloated agencies that every penny of it is necessary. And guys, they haven't been doing that for a long time. Now let's get to a part of the panel that's actually getting a lot of traction online in right-wing circles, because we covered the fallout that Democrats are protesting against Elon Musk and his involvement in the federal government. And they had this rally where Democrat after Democrat went up and just attacked him in the most hysterical and alarmist terms. And some of them were just so cringe. And they played this montage for us. And this CNN panel, which again was the liberals far outnumbered the right-leaning people, literally laughed out loud at how ridiculous the Democrats were. Take a look.
Democrats agree that Musk is a problem, but listen to them today. And they have a piñata in search of a stick.
To our Republican colleagues, if you do not see the light, we will bring the fire. Resist!
We are going to be in your face. We are going to be on your asses.
We have days to stop the destruction of our democracy. We have work to do. Tell Elon Musk to take his hands off your money. We don't pledge allegiance to the creepy 22-year-olds working for Elon Musk. We pledge allegiance to the United States of America.
And goddamn it, shut down the Senate! We are at war!
We will win! We will win! We will win! We won't rest! We won't rest!
Gretchen.
I'm
Yes,
so sorry. Can we play it again?
The Democrats need a real.
I love this. Even the CNN liberals could not help themselves but laugh at the absurd and hysterical spectacle of Chuck Schumer, one of the Democrats' leaders, going, "We will resist." Like, calm down, Grandpa. There are, I think, actually some legitimate criticisms to potentially be made, and lawsuits will be filed about some of the ways that Trump and Musk are trying to roll back the federal government. I definitely support their goals, but I do question some of their methods, and it will have to be sorted out through court challenges and the like. But Democrats are just taking it to a hysterical level. We're not at war because they are trying to shut down one federal agency. Like, this is hysterical and it is alarmist, and that kind of rhetoric does have consequences and I think is harmful. And I tried to argue that to this panel of left-leaning people and to, more importantly, the CNN audience, that there are legitimate critiques to be made of Trump, but the constant alarmism and hysteria and invocations of fascism and Nazis and all this is not helpful and is actually, I think, profoundly disrespectful, and also discredits any legitimate critiques you might have because people tune you out because you rave like a hysterical person. Here's the message I tried to deliver.
Everyone's like, what just happened?
But do you think the screaming, the Nazi rhetoric, one of the Democratic congresswomen literally called, I think it was Ayanna Pressley, but it was a Democratic congresswoman, literally called Elon Musk a Nazi. Do we really think that kind of alarmism is helpful?
No, I totally agree with you.
After years, don't you think Democrats would learn that just screaming hyperbole about Trump, America's rolling their eyes. They rolled their eyes in 2016. They rolled their eyes in 2024.
You're at 15 every single day. Okay? People are going to tune out.
So I actually felt pretty good about that clip because even the CNN host, Abby Phillip, agreed with me. She correctly noted that if you're always at a 15 out of 10 in terms of your fire alarm, your scale, your doomsday clock, and your rhetoric, at some point people are going to be like, okay, well, they're warning us every day that it's the end of democracy, every day that fascism is here, that this latest act is just so terrible. People are going to stop listening. It's the boy who cried wolf phenomenon. So then, if Trump actually does something crazy or does go too far, people aren't going to take those warnings seriously, and that's a real problem. So hopefully that point resonated with the audience that needs to hear it, which I think is the CNN audience and some of the people on that panel. And that's what I was trying to do, is bring a different perspective. And overall, I really had a good experience, really enjoyed it, and would love to go back.